Meet the richest broke people in the country. On paper, this family is worth $11 million. Land, cattle, equipment, all of it adds up to a number that would make most bankers smile. And yet last month, they couldn't cover a $4,000 vet bill without borrowing against the harvest. That's not a contradiction. That's the entire ranching industry in one sentence. You can own an empire of grass and still not have enough cash in the bank to fix a broken water pump. Today we're going to find out why the people who look the wealthiest on the outside are often the ones with the least breathing room on the inside, and whether owning a ranch is actually a business, or just a very expensive, very beautiful way to stay asset-rich and cash-poor for the rest of your life. Let's start with the number that convinces most people to walk away before they even make an offer: the land itself. Ranch land in America isn't one price. It's 100 different prices depending on which zip code you're standing in. In the dry stretches of eastern Wyoming, an acre can run you somewhere around $1,000. Head into the Texas Hill Country near Austin, and that same acre jumps to anywhere from $7,000 to over $30,000. Get close to Colorado's Front Range, and prices in some pockets climb past $50,000 an acre. Same word, ranch, completely different financial planet. Here's the trap almost every first-time buyer falls into. They see the cheap land in Wyoming and think they've found a bargain. What they don't realize is that cheap land is cheap because it can't support many cattle per acre. In dry country, one cow might need 20 or 30 acres just to find enough grass to survive. So to run a real herd, 500 cows, you're not buying a few hundred acres. You're buying 10 to 15,000 acres. Do that math at $1,000 an acre, and you've just spent $10 to $15 million before you've bought a single animal. And that's before infrastructure. A raw piece of land with no fencing, no wells, no barns, is not a ranch. It's a field with a for sale sign missing. Perimeter fencing on a property that size can easily run $300,000 to $600,000. Water wells, another $50,000 to $100,000. Working corrals and a squeeze chute to handle cattle safely, another $25,000 to $60,000. A barn big enough to store a winter's worth of hay without it rotting, another $40,000 to $150,000. Add roads, housing for workers, equipment sheds, and new owners routinely spend $500,000 to over $1 million just getting the land ready to hold livestock. None of that money produces income. It's the cost of admission. Then come the animals themselves. A pregnant commercial cow runs somewhere between $2,000 and $3,500, depending on the market. Bulls are the expensive part. You need roughly one for every 25 to 30 cows, and a bull with strong genetics. The kind that produces calves that gain weight faster and grade higher at the packing plant can cost anywhere from $5,000 to $50,000. Assemble a 500-cow herd with proper bull coverage, and you've spent another $1.5 to $2 million. Add tractors, trucks, a livestock trailer, a baler, and you're financing another $250,000 in equipment on top of everything else. So before this ranch has generated a single dollar, the owner is somewhere between $7 and $12 million deep. Now let's talk about what that investment actually pays back every year, because this is where the romance collides with the spreadsheet. Operating a herd of this size costs somewhere close to $1,000 per cow per year, once you count feed, vet care, fuel, and labor. On 500 cows, that's roughly $500,000 to $1 million in expenses annually, and those bills don't wait for a good month. Hay has to be bought in December whether or not you sold any calves in December. Vets get paid the week a calf is sick, not the week your bank account is full. Revenue, on the other hand, arrives almost all at once. You wean calves in the fall, sell them by the pound, and that's essentially your entire year's income in a single check. If your herd weans around 450 calves and the market is strong, you might net somewhere close to $1 million in gross revenue. Subtract the operating costs, and a genuinely well-run operation might clear somewhere between $0 and $100,000 of actual profit in a good year. On a $7 to $12 million investment, that's a return you could beat with a savings account, and a savings account doesn't require you to wake up at 4 a.m. during a blizzard to pull a calf. Now picture the bad version of that same year. A late spring storm kills off a chunk of the calf crop. A drought hits in July, grass stops growing 2 months early, and suddenly you're buying hay at double the price because every rancher within 100 miles needs it too. The market softens right when you're ready to sell, so your calves bring less per pound than you budgeted for. That single year can swing from a $100,000 profit to a $300,000 loss, and the terrifying part is that almost none of it was within the owner's control. Weather and cattle prices run this business, not the rancher. This is exactly what happened to families across the southern plains during the drought years of the early 2020s. These weren't rookies. Some of these operations had been run by the same families for 3 generations. They knew every water hole and every acre of good grass on their land. It didn't matter. The tanks dried up anyway, the hay prices tripled anyway, and eventually they sold cattle at the bottom of the market just to survive the season, which meant fewer calves to sell the following year, which meant a slower recovery even after the rain came back. Experience doesn't buy you out of a drought. It just means you see it coming a little sooner. So why does anyone keep doing this? Because the smart operators stopped treating cattle as the only product coming off the land. A ranch with good deer or turkey hunting can lease access to hunting groups for real annual income, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars without selling a single cow. Extra hay in a wet year can be baled and sold to neighboring ranchers who ran short. Some landowners lean into agritourism entirely, turning cabins and trail rides into a boutique hospitality business that happens to have cattle wandering around in the background. The operations that survive long-term are almost never the ones running the biggest herd. They're the ones who built 2 or 3 income streams so that one bad cattle year doesn't sink the whole business. And then there's the reason the wealthiest people in the country keep buying enormous ranches despite economics that would make any accountant nervous. It was never about the calves. A 100,000-acre property is privacy that money can't easily buy anywhere else. Land in the United States has appreciated steadily for decades, not spectacularly, but reliably, without the volatility of a stock portfolio. And in many states, keeping even a small token cattle herd on the land qualifies the property for a massive agricultural tax exemption, cutting property taxes to a fraction of what they'd otherwise be. For a billionaire, running cattle at a loss to unlock that tax status and hold an appreciating, private, 1,000-acre buffer around their house is a completely rational trade. The cows aren't the business. The cows are the receipt that keeps the tax bill low, which brings us to the real answer buried inside all of this. A ranch can absolutely build serious wealth, but almost never through the cattle themselves. The cattle cover the light bill while the land quietly compounds in value in the background, year after year, decade after decade. The families who make it are the ones who understood that distinction early. Keep enough cash reserves to survive a drought without selling the herd, diversify beyond the calf check, and treat the land, not the livestock, as the actual investment. Because at the end of the day, the porch, the sunrise, the horizon, that part of the dream is real. It's the spreadsheet underneath it that decides whether you get to keep watching that sunrise, or whether the bank ends up watching it instead.